Is Oklahoma wide receiver Marvin Mims the most overlooked player in the 2023 NFL Draft? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Make sure you follow my co-host, Kate Magdziuk, on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Kate, we are talking about one of my favorite players in the draft. I don't mean to ruin things off the top, but let's just start with this. Why is Marvin Mims the most overlooked player in this year's draft?
Marvin Mims is ridiculous, man. We were talking ahead of the show, and let's just give a total preview. We love this guy. We absolutely love this guy, both of us. Marvin Mims, junior out of Oklahoma, 5'11" and 1/4 inches, measured in at 183 pounds. So again, he's one of these smaller receivers. 20 years old. He's just approaching his 21st birthday. Happy birthday, Marvin.
Happy birthday.
Next week is his 21st birthday. Celebrate safely. But the dude is productive out of Oklahoma. Last year, his final season, his junior season, 54 catches, 1,082 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, broke out super early. In his freshman year, had a 2020 season with 610 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns as a freshman. This guy can play all over. He played mostly outside, played around 70% of snaps outside in his freshman and junior seasons. Weirdly had this transition to the slot in 2021, but was still productive. This guy's a speedster, Marcus, and he does so many things right. And I'm struggling to find knocks on Marvin Mims. I think the biggest one we can come up with is that he's, relatively undersized at a weight of 183 pounds, ranks in just the 11th percentile for wide receivers. But everything else, check. Ran a 4.38 40. This guy, what am I missing with Marvin Mims?
Let's go to the weight really quickly, because you mentioned that's probably his biggest knock. And it is, right? He's not overly thick. That's just not his game. However, you look at the rest of the receivers in this class and the guys that are being ranked ahead of him, Zay Flowers had to bulk up to 182, Tank Dell's 166, Jordan Addison came in at 173. I think Jalen Hyatt's 176. So yeah, it's a concern, but it's less of a concern than it is for 7 other receivers that are being ranked high in this draft. And the part that I like is there are some really small receivers in this class, right? The guys that are barely 5'9", right? Zay Flowers, who we like a lot, 5'09" Marvin Mims is over 5'11". And not that that's a cutoff or anything, but it does seem like once you get above the 5'10" mark, your height's not really an issue. So when you have, let's say, average height, fantastic speed, amazing explosion, phenomenal, advanced stats, which we'll get to in a little bit, what are we missing?
I don't know what we're missing, because I brought up his age, right? 20 years old. This kid has a lot of time to bulk up, right? And he's already got the size. It feels irrelevant to me at this point, because I think there's plenty of room to grow there. We know he's versatile. Let's talk about his combine, because he crushed the combine. Probably one of the biggest winners. We knew he was a speedster, but again, ran that 4.38 40-yard dash, 90th percentile for wide receivers, just under a 40-inch vert, 89th percentile, 129-inch broad jump, 89th percentile. This guy showed the explosion that you see on the field in every single testing element that he showcased at the combine. So we have the production, relatively speaking, in terms of his size. It's no more of a concern than it is for any other wide receiver in this class. So what are we missing? I genuinely don't know. Let's talk about some of like the more advanced stats, like you
Yes.
mentioned, Marcus.
Yes, I would love to. So, courtesy of Pro Football Focus, we have some of his stable metrics from the last 3 seasons. I'll just go through with some of them. His receiving grade during that time, 97th percentile. His receiving grade versus single coverage, or just his PFF grade in single coverage, 99.9. Right? Like
That's good.
that's pretty good. Separation percentage, 91st percentile. Yards per route run, 90th percentile. Average depth of target, 96th percentile. Every single metric that PFF has that they consider stable, that translates from year to year, he is at the very tippy top. And then on top of that, you mentioned the breakout age. You mentioned the dominator rating. Like everything, he just checks every box. And yet, I don't see the draft community. I think Dynasty Twitter is a little bit smarter here, but I don't see the draft community showing him any type of love, even compared to somebody like Tank Dell.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, Marcus. You were talking about like your consensus draft board, right? Like
Yes.
PFF has him outside of the top 100. Nobody has this guy within the top 100, which again is just shocking for this guy that just I haven't found a single element to his game that I don't like. Just watching his tapes, and we've talked a little bit about the stats. Um, uh, uh, you know, Watching his tape, just great concentration, especially when he's in traffic, which I always think is just so baller when you have some of these smaller guys who are making some of these catches, even uncontested catches, right? Like if you're making those catches and you're surrounded by like even one DB that is going to hit you that moment the ball touches your hands, and you're able to hold on to the ball through that moment and be
Yes.
unfazed. Like Marvin Mims has that dog mentality. Even for his contested catch rate, he's been successful in his contested catch opportunities.
Yes.
But he's so smooth. You see the speed on the field. He's so smooth. Throughout college, what I think is super impressive, like has been fantastic in terms of like his yards per route run, and all of that. But yards after the catch per reception, 78th percentile. Average depth of target, 96th percentile. So like
Yes.
this is a guy that's still generating a lot of yards after the catch, despite being targeted pretty deep down the field. And I think that's just such a testament to his speed, his ability to generate space
Yes.
with his explosion. It's just a lot easier to make those plays when you're just faster than everybody on the field.
And the other thing I want to mention, yes, he did play 2 years in Lincoln Riley's offense, and he did play with some good quarterbacks, including Caleb Williams as a freshman, although Caleb Williams only started half the season. But what I like about him is that he's produced with everybody that he's played with, whether it was Dylan Gabriel, Caleb Williams, Spencer Rattler. Like he was just awesome, right? And that's kind of the sign of a great receiver. Now, the overall counting stats, like if you look at the yards and stuff, okay, 1,000 yards this year, 6 touchdowns, 700 yards last year. But to me, it's more whenever they target him, he produced, and that's as good as you can do as a college receiver. Um, I think he's a fantastic player, and I don't understand why he's not getting more hype.
He made the most of every single opportunity that he had. Another probably underrated aspect of Marvin Mims, even when he's not being targeted, Marcus, like he's a willing blocker down the field. Like he's again not even the biggest dude, but like he's willing to throw hands.
Yes.
Even when the ball's not coming his way, he's ready to get down and dirty. I love this kid. And he's going to be on every single one of my
Yep.
dynasty teams because I'm probably going to draft him way too high.
Don't care.
The range of outcomes, he feels like one of the safer wide receivers in this class, and I just don't understand the lack of hype.
I I'm 100% with you. Let's talk about some potential landing spots for Marvin Mims next. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and the calories? Then you've got to try a Built Bar. We're getting pretty close to summer. Spring's on its way here. If you're trying to get ready for beach season, Built Bar is here to help you out. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious that you're not even going to think that they're good for you. What makes Built Bars so awesome? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, 100% real chocolate. And they come in so many unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. Not sure how Built does it because they only have 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but a whopping 17 grams of protein. And you can always go to built.com to order some boxes. I do that all the time. But if you live close to a Walmart or a Sam's Club, you can walk into the pharmacy section of your Walmart and get a 4-box of the cookies and cream, double chocolate, or the coconut puffs. Or if you live near a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with some of the hit flavors, including brownie batter and churro. You can thank us later. All right, Kate. So you mentioned the consensus board at the top. Just not a lot of people kind of in on Marvin Mims right now. PFF has him outside their top 100. Todd McShay has him ranked as wide receiver 16 in this class, 114th overall. Daniel Jeremiah has him outside of his top 50. So I think he's probably somebody that's going to go at the very best, top, late second round, more likely third round. If that's the case, where would you like to see him land?
Oh, Marcus, so let's talk about like where he's being mocked because I think you're gonna, of course, love this. 14% of PFF mock drafts to date have him going to the Cowboys. How would you feel about Marvin Mims to the Cowboys? Because he would absolutely bring that element of explosion. He would bring that much needed speed. I actually think that's a really intriguing landing spot, just in terms of team needs. And I think he brings a real level of safety to that wide receiver 2 position that I don't really think they had in the 2022 season.
We've mentioned the Cowboys a lot as potential landing spots for some of these receivers, including, say, Flowers.
This is my favorite fit, though.
Booty. You're right. This is the best one, right? Because it does check all the boxes the Cowboys need. They need a guy that can play on the outside and in the slot because CeeDee Lamb moves around a lot. They need somebody who can bring speed, but not somebody who is a gadget player at 5'8" or 5'9". That's not Marvin Mims. I love that fit. I think that's exactly the type of receiver the Cowboys are missing.
And you know what? Like you mentioned, CeeDee Lamb, he moves around a lot. He plays a lot out of the slot. So like, no problem because Marvin Mims, he can play on the outside. You want to move CeeDee Lamb outside? Great. Marvin Mims can play the slot. Like he's a versatile enough wide receiver. I think that's probably my favorite fit out of any team. But honestly, Marcus, I think he's just a fantastic wide receiver too for virtually any team. I would love this fit. Buffalo at pick 60.
Perfect.
Feels like the right range. Although Marcus, the Cowboys draft 59, so maybe he doesn't fall to Buffalo if that rings true. But like that feels fantastic, right? I feel like there are just so many potential landing spots where he'd be a good fit.
And that's the thing is I'm looking at like the third round draft order right now, and it's like, yeah, makes sense. Miami, sure. Put him in the slot, have him play with Tyreek and Waddle. Fantastic. Colts, yep, that's exactly the type of receiver they need. Green Bay, sure, love it. There's not many places that I wouldn't be excited about him going.
So let's talk about if that's the case, because I very much agree. There's not a lot of spots where I wouldn't be excited to see him land. Give me a couple of those spots that you just feel like wouldn't be the best fit, because I think that's probably like, you know how sometimes the answers are much fewer when you ask the right, like I think that's the more interesting question to ask here is where wouldn't you want him to go? Because I think he's a great fit for so many offenses.
The 49ers have 3 third-round picks, all basically right in the row at the bottom of the third round. This seems like a type of player they would draft. They actually drafted Danny Gray last year. That I would love to see him go there just because they don't throw the ball enough and they've already got how many weapons in that offense. I just think he would end up being a guy that is super efficient but low volume. So avoid that one. Kansas City is another one where they just have so many guys. And I think the plan going forward is just to use a bunch of receivers. And I think people would see him getting drafted by Kansas City and you'd see a massive bump that maybe he shouldn't get. I wouldn't love that one either.
How about another team that he's being mocked to quite often, the Pittsburgh Steelers? They've got picks that I think are, within the right range. If he goes a little bit higher, if the draft community starts to rise on him a bit, they've got a pick at 50, which feels like if the Steelers utilize that 50th pick on a guy like Marvin Mims, I would have absolutely no issue to that. Again, it just doesn't feel like there's not a lot of great fits. It's fascinating to see like a guy that I think is just
New England.
So yeah, he fits into literally.
I was gonna say that's a
any
bad fit for
offense.
me, just because I don't trust that New England offense at all.
I don't trust the New England offense, but if New England were to draft, that's a win for New England. Period.
Well, it's just different than what they're used to drafting, right? Like that's a guy that does make some sense for them.
Yeah, don't love that for fantasy, of course, because I
like the real life fit, not the fantasy fit.
I like yes, that's a great way to put it. I think there's Marcus, the realm of possibilities here is just virtually endless. And what's even better? Like, I think that Marvin Mims, his floor for fantasy feels really safe in a lot of these landing spots. Like there's not a lot of spots either for fantasy that I'm thinking, ooh, I hope he doesn't go there. Cause I think he's got the skills to fit in wherever he needs to fit in.
So it's clear that you and I love Marvin Mims,
Too
the player,
much.
a lot. I'm going to be a wet blanket on his dynasty value next. All right, Kate, let's talk about his current dynasty value on Dynasty League Football. He's being ranked as wide receiver 7, just behind Zay Flowers, Josh Downs, and Jalen Hyatt. Behind him, Rashee Rice, Kayshon Boutte, Cedric Tillman, Tyler Scott. I got to be honest, that feels too high for me.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm actually, I feel like that feels just about perfect for me.
Make the case.
I think, again, looking at the range of outcomes of the members of this receiving class, Marcus, it feels like Marvin Mims, he's got plenty of ceiling. Like I could just picture him being like a perennial wide receiver too. I think he's so safe for me. He can be a wide receiver too for me in pretty much most of the landing spots we've discussed. I think there's, still room to grow in terms of his ability to bulk up. I just see a much wider range of outcomes for some of the players going after him. Rashee Rice, a guy that I think really helped his draft stock here at the NFL Combine. I think, despite the nice testing, I don't think his tape necessarily matches up quite as much with what we saw on the field or during the Combine. Kayshon Boutte, we're out. Like it feels like this is a perfect spot for him, given the range of outcomes, given his upside, given his youth. He's one of the youngest receivers in this range here. I don't understand I don't understand, Marcus. Help me understand why he should be drafted lower than that. Because
I think on talent, he should be drafted higher than that. I do. My problem is when you look at these big boards and the consensus big boards, I don't put a lot of stock into Daniel Jeremiah and Todd McShay and their ability to evaluate players. What their big boards are basically doing is giving us a snapshot of what NFL teams think of players, right? Because that's basically what they're doing. They're just they're talking to their GM friends and their scout friends, and they're making a board. If Daniel Jeremiah, Todd McShay, Mel Kiper, and Dane Brugler from The Athletic all have him outside their top 100. To me, that it means the NFL teams don't view him as a top 100 pick, right? Because if he were, those guys would be getting text, hey, put this guy up in your 50s. Like, he's going high. It makes me nervous that Mims has a chance to just be like a day 3 pick. And if you're a day 3 pick, I don't know if I can rank you inside the top 7 or 8 dynasty receivers.
I mean, I think that's fair. I think the biggest question for me is just I'm by no means a professional scout, but I would love to hear some of the insight
Yes, I
and
agree.
analysis from these mock drafters in terms of like why isn't he getting the buzz? I don't know that there's any like off the field concerns that I've heard of. I don't know if you can speak any
I haven't
differently
heard
on that.
anything. I haven't heard anything.
Like it doesn't make sense based on the player we've seen. Like the tape matches with the stats, matches with the production, matches with the combine. There's clearly a missing element that
Yes.
I'm not getting, and maybe we'll get more information as we get closer to the NFL draft. But for face value, for my own evaluation of Marvin Mims, it feels right on point. And I do wonder, there's going to be plenty of time for Marvin Mims, and we see draft stock fluctuate very rapidly at this point in the year. OU's pro day, we'll see what comes of that. But for right now, I think wide receiver 7 feels good for me. And
I
I
would
do
love to be
think that
wrong.
the talent, if he goes in day 2, right? Like
Yes.
that's a
Yes.
guy that I think his talent will rise to the top, and I'm comfortable with that.
Again, I just want to be clear too. Like, it has nothing against Marvin Mims. I love the player, and it wouldn't even be a surprise because we see this as we get a little closer to the draft. You start to see McShay and Jeremiah and Dane just boost them up right in their rankings, and then if that happens, listen, I'm all in at wide receiver 7, wide receiver 8 because he's that talented. We're As of right now, you mentioned it, I think we've got to be missing something here because he's too good to be ranked outside the top 100 players for all of these draft scouts.
It doesn't make sense. It
It doesn't make sense.
genuinely it doesn't make sense to me. So, guys, I would love to hear what the community thinks of this guy. I would love to hear more because Marcus, you mentioned the dynasty community feels a bit higher on Marvin Mims than the actual
Mhm.
the NFL draft community. I want to close the gap. I want to figure out what the reason for that gap is, and tell us
Yes.
what you think about this guy. Are we just rose colored glasses? Is that the phrase?
Yes. We love Marvin Mims. I think that's just what we got to close out this show.
Yep.
That's it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Now make your second listen to Locked On NFL Draft Show. Damian Parsons and Keith Sanchez provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into sleepers and hidden gems that can change your favorite NFL franchise. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'd like to thank you for checking out this show. Go look us up on YouTube. We do daily shows over there as well. You can download the podcast wherever you download podcasts. Go follow Kate at Kate Magdziuk. I am at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your weekend. Next week is free agency. We're going to be diving into that, talking about all the movers and shakers. We'll see you guys then.